Many people believe rent is rising because the market is tough, but a deeper pattern has been forming across neighborhoods. None of this is random. It all traces back to one quiet move that started after the 2008 crash. A move that let Wall Street turn normal houses into long-term payment machines. Entire neighborhoods shift from regular owners to faceless companies. Rent increases come in the exact same amounts, at the exact same time, even in buildings miles apart. And the fees look copied and pasted, down to the last dollar. This is the story of how your home became a line item on a balance sheet, how rent became something closer to a subscription fee, and how Wall Street quietly found a way to turn normal neighborhoods into steady machines that pay them again and again. Across many cities, people keep running into the same problem when trying to find a place to live. They notice listings vanish fast, prices jump in perfect rhythm, and buildings feel connected even when owned by different names, creating a sense that something coordinated is happening behind the scenes. Families who once hoped to buy a small home start to realize they are being outbid by groups with far more money. Every time an offer is placed, another buyer appears who pays in full, skipping every step regular people need, blocking the path to ownership entirely. People begin to feel like the entire housing market has shifted into a space controlled by someone they can't see. Homes that once belonged to local owners start turning into rentals owned by companies with long, distant names that never show up in the neighborhood. The change becomes clear when renters start comparing notes. They notice identical rent jumps, identical fees, identical wording in emails, and identical rules across completely different properties. It feels like one giant system is pulling everything together from above. In many neighborhoods, the shift began right after the 2008 crash. When millions of families lost their homes, large investment groups quietly stepped in and bought thousands of properties at prices regular people could never access, setting the stage for a new type of landlord. These groups didn't stop at buying homes. They turned them into rental portfolios, bundled them like financial products, and set up systems that made every tenant's monthly payment flow upward, with almost no personal connection between tenant and owner. People renting these homes start feeling like they're living inside a payment machine, not a neighborhood. Maintenance becomes slow, fees grow fast, and every request goes through platforms that feel designed for speed on the company's end and frustration on the tenant's end. Even renters moving to new cities notice the same patterns. No matter the state, buildings seem to be controlled by similar portals, similar rules, and similar fee structures. It becomes clear that many of these systems and companies are linked to the same few financial players. The rental portals start charging for everything: application fees, convenience fees, processing fees, portal fees, inspection fees, and cleaning fees. People feel like they're paying for air, yet these charges become standard across multiple properties owned by unrelated companies. Some renters try to chase cheaper rent by moving farther from work, only to discover that companies have already moved into those quieter neighborhoods too. The same patterns follow them, making it feel like there is no real escape from the new system. People buying starter homes see bidding wars that barely last minutes. Regular families bring their best offers, but large investors show up with funds ready, buying 10 or 20 homes at once, locking families out and reshaping the entire entry-level housing market. In many areas, companies buy houses in clusters instead of single purchases. They target entire blocks or neighborhoods, gaining control over what rents become and how fast they rise. This creates an environment where competition is removed before renters even notice. Local landlords who once managed a few homes struggle to compete. They cannot match the offers made by massive firms, and slowly the small landlords disappear. The neighborhood feels less personal as more houses fall under large corporate ownership. Tenants notice that communication changes. Instead of talking to someone who lives nearby, they deal with automated responses, phone trees, and outsourced call centers. Even simple issues become drawn-out tasks because the companies managing the homes operate at huge scales. Each lease renewal brings new pricing. Many renters see increases that match each other down to the dollar, even in different states. It becomes clear the adjustments aren't based on local conditions, but on centralized decisions made by distant teams analyzing spreadsheets. The companies behind these homes view them as assets that must grow in value every year. Tenants are not seen as neighbors, but as revenue streams that need to rise predictably. This mindset shapes every policy, every fee, and every interaction. Some renters try to fight back by reporting issues to local authorities, but the companies often have large legal teams or property managers who follow every regulation with technical precision, making complaints difficult to push forward. People feel trapped in a perfect loop. Renters share stories online about identical problems, repairs never finished, sudden fees added mid-lease, and confusing payment systems that penalize even slight mistakes. When comparing experiences, they realize many of the companies they're dealing with share the same parent organizations. As more neighborhoods fall under corporate ownership, the character of those places changes. Houses stay rented for years because tenants cannot afford to buy. Yards look similar, rules become strict, and everything feels controlled by faraway decision makers. People begin to see that rent is no longer just a monthly payment. It behaves more like a subscription that renews automatically, grows consistently, and never offers a path toward ownership or stability, making many wonder how long they can keep going. Some families move in search of cheaper housing, only to discover the same companies already operate in the next city. The pricing patterns follow them, creating a sense that the housing market has been stitched together by forces much larger than any single community. Neighborhoods that once felt local start to feel standardized. The same color palettes, the same rules, the same exterior maintenance, and the same rental terms spread across state lines, making places that used to feel distinct start resembling each other in almost every way. People renting single-family homes feel the shift the most. These homes, originally meant for families to buy, become long-term rentals with strict terms. Tenants feel locked in because every move leads to similar or worse pricing controlled by the same style of ownership. The monthly rent increases feel mechanical, like someone turning a dial little by little. Renters realize these changes match quarterly earnings reports and financial forecasts, revealing how deeply their daily lives are tied to corporate expectations far beyond their control. As renters trace the companies tied to their homes, they uncover connections to major financial groups, investment funds, and firms that specialize in turning everything into predictable income. This discovery sparks a bigger question about how neighborhoods became part of a massive financial strategy. Renters who dig deeper into ownership records discover that many properties are controlled by shell companies. These names look different on paper, yet they lead back to the same parent groups, showing how the real power is concentrated far from the neighborhood. People begin noticing how these companies design their systems to run smoothly for investors while shifting every inconvenience onto tenants. Late fees are automatic, maintenance responses are slow, and contracts are structured in ways that always favor the property owner. Many families start to understand that their rent increases are not tied to improvements or better service. They rise because these companies must meet financial targets, turning each tenant's situation into a predictable number on a quarterly chart. As more homes fall under corporate ownership, local housing markets lose the flexibility they once had. Smaller landlords, who might have negotiated or understood personal situations, are replaced by systems that treat every tenant exactly the same, regardless of circumstance. Some renters try to push back by comparing property listings, but they discover the market is already shaped by these large firms. Many listings disappear quickly because companies buy homes in bulk long before regular families even know they were available. When renters look for relief, they often find that every alternative is tied to the same networks. Whether they search for apartments, townhouses, or single-family rentals, the same management portals reappear, creating an experience that feels nearly impossible to escape. People start sharing stories about rent hikes that seem unrelated to local wages or conditions. These increases appear coordinated across wide areas, creating a sense that the housing market has been shaped by something larger than supply and demand. Families who once hoped to save for a down payment realize their rent leaves little room for savings. Even when they manage to save something, rapidly rising home prices driven by investor competition push ownership further out of reach. Neighborhoods that once had a mix of owners and renters become dominated by corporate landlords. This shift affects everything from local businesses to school enrollment, creating a slower moving but visible change in the fabric of the community. Many renters describe the same unsettling moment when they realize their landlord is not a person but a distant operation. Requests go through anonymous portals, decisions come from unseen teams, and interactions feel mechanical rather than human. Reports begin to emerge about companies using algorithms to determine rent. These programs track regional data, income trends, and neighborhood popularity, pushing prices upward in ways tenants never agreed to and often cannot predict until renewal time. When renters discuss their experiences, they notice how the system feels methodical. Every rule, every penalty, and every rent adjustment aligns with a larger plan designed to keep revenue flowing upward without ever considering the individual household. Communities that once relied on stable neighbors now see more frequent turnover. Families move often because they cannot absorb the rising costs, and neighborhoods lose the sense of continuity that once made them feel familiar and secure. Some renters explore the option of buying a home, but the more they search, the more they realize how many properties are snatched up by institutional buyers. These groups move faster, offer more, and view homes strictly as assets. The shift becomes clearer when people recognize how predictable rent increases have become. They notice the timing feels the same each year, suggesting decisions are shaped by financial cycles rather than individual property needs or local cost changes. At community meetings, renters start discussing how the same corporate names dominate ownership records. These names appear across cities and states, revealing that housing is being consolidated into fewer and fewer hands. Families begin questioning why their homes require them to follow strict digital systems. Payments, maintenance, documents, and even conversations must pass through online platforms created by the same networks behind institutional real estate investment. The more people compare notes, the more they understand that their rent is not just income for a property owner. It feeds large investment structures that rely on growth, meaning each lease renewal is designed to produce higher returns year after year. Some renters attempt to negotiate with property managers, but they soon realize that decisions come from data models rather than personal conversations. These models prioritize consistency across thousands of homes, leaving no room for individual flexibility. In many neighborhoods, people notice that once a company buys a cluster of homes, local prices rise quickly. Other firms follow because rising prices signal strong returns, turning entire communities into investment zones rather than places to settle. Renters who live in areas controlled by these companies feel the shift most intensely. They describe monthly payments that rise like clockwork, rules that grow stricter each year, and a sense of being managed rather than housed. Property maintenance often becomes inconsistent. Companies stretch resources across wide regions, leading to slow repairs and repeated issues. Tenants feel frustrated, yet the structure keeps rent high because financial models depend on consistent income regardless of service quality. People start noticing how these companies work together in ways that shape the entire market. When one firm raises its prices, others follow because they rely on similar data and forecasts, creating synchronized cost increases across huge areas. Families who try to escape rising prices by moving to different regions find the same companies already operating there. Patterns repeat, making it clear the housing situation is not a local issue, but part of a massive national strategy. As this pattern becomes harder to ignore, people start to understand why their rent feels like a payment they can never shake. Their homes have been transformed into assets feeding large financial structures, turning everyday living costs into long-term revenue streams. People begin noticing how these companies manage risk in ways ordinary families never could. When markets shift, they simply adjust rents across thousands of homes at once, passing every pressure downward and leaving tenants carrying the full weight of each financial change. As corporate ownership expands, the line between housing and finance becomes harder to separate. Homes transform into predictable revenue tools, and each tenant's living situation becomes part of a larger plan designed to generate steady returns for investors around the world. Many renters come across news reports explaining how investment firms use rental income to support complex financial products. These products depend on long-term stability, meaning rent must rise consistently to satisfy forecasts, resulting in a cycle the tenant never agreed to. During renewal season, renters feel the system tightening. They receive notices shaped by algorithms rather than personal evaluation, creating predictable increases that appear across many properties at nearly the same time, reinforcing the idea of one coordinated structure. Neighborhoods that once felt personal begin to feel more controlled. Strict rules govern everything from yard appearance to parking, and tenants sense these guidelines exist not for community well-being, but to protect property values within large investment portfolios. Parents start noticing the long-term impact on their families. Rising rents make it harder to stay rooted in one place, affecting friendships, school stability, and community involvement. Each move becomes more expensive, making many feel stuck no matter where they go. Some renters try to track where their money goes, chasing through layers of companies. They move from property managers to holding firms to investment funds, learning that their rent flows upward into chains so long that no human connection remains. Communities feel the impact when longtime residents leave. Fewer people know their neighbors. Local traditions break apart, and streets gain a more temporary feeling as families rotate through homes controlled by companies that never set foot in the area. As news of institutional buying spreads, people begin questioning why regular families must compete against billion-dollar groups for basic shelter. The imbalance feels overwhelming, as if everyday buyers are being pushed out before they even join the game. Renters who search for transparency find little clarity. Ownership records list complex corporate structures, and decisions appear driven by software rather than individuals. The system is designed to protect investors, leaving tenants feeling invisible within their own homes. People begin hearing about large firms projecting rental growth years ahead. These projections do not consider whether tenants can afford the changes. They are built on financial strategies, meaning rent increases are planned long before the tenant even signs the lease. Entire regions start to reflect the same pattern. Homes once owned by multiple local families now belong to a handful of corporations, each guided by similar strategies, making entire states feel controlled by a few powerful interests shaping the housing landscape. Faced with rising costs, some renters consider moving in with relatives or downsizing. But as they search, they find even smaller homes or apartments owned by the same companies, making it difficult to find a truly independent alternative. Renters begin noticing how fast companies adopt new digital tools. Automated pricing systems, maintenance apps, and online portals replace human contact. These tools save companies money, while giving tenants less control over how their concerns are handled. People growing up in these neighborhoods notice the change in atmosphere. Homes turn into investment pieces rather than personal spaces, and young adults see fewer paths toward ownership as prices continue climbing far beyond what they can save. Renters searching online learn that these companies often receive huge financial advantages. They have access to credit, partnerships, and market forecast ordinary people could never match, allowing them to buy homes in bulk and reshape entire markets in their favor. Families watching these trends unfold realize that the housing market no longer feels like a free system. It behaves more like a structure managed by powerful players who use their scale to influence pricing, competition, and access across whole regions. Some renters attempt to challenge the system by reporting issues or filing complaints, but they soon discover how many layers of management exist. Each complaint passes through multiple hands, slowing progress and reinforcing how distant the decision-makers truly are. Communities facing rapid corporate expansion often see changes in local priorities. Maintenance budgets shrink, amenities decline, and rules tighten. This shift shows how companies prioritize cost control and revenue over the everyday needs of tenants living in these homes. Many renters reach a moment where they recognize the cycle they are trapped in. Moving doesn't provide relief because the same patterns follow them, and staying means accepting rising costs that feel completely disconnected from their own financial reality. Parents trying to give their children stable homes feel the pressure as each rent increase limits other parts of life. Vacations disappear, savings shrink, and long-term planning becomes difficult because housing costs rise faster than wages in many major areas. People begin questioning how housing became so uniform. They realize the standardization across neighborhoods reflects a corporate approach designed for efficiency, scalability, and predictable income, replacing the variety and independence that once defined local housing markets. News stories highlight how institutional investors quietly grew their presence after the 2008 crash. This timeline helps people understand why the shift feels sudden today, even though it has been building steadily for more than a decade across the entire country. When renters talk to older neighbors, they hear stories of a time when homes were much easier to buy. These conversations highlight how dramatically the market has changed, helping renters realize the current system did not emerge by accident. People begin piecing everything together and see the pattern clearly. Their rent is high not because of random market swings, but because homes have become financial instruments, shaped by distant decisions that turn daily living costs into long-term profit streams. People following these trends begin to understand how deeply housing is now tied to financial markets. When investment firms expect steady growth, rent rises to match those expectations, placing ordinary families inside a system driven by goals they never had a say in. Renters notice how predictable everything becomes once they recognize the pattern. Lease terms, fee structures, annual increases, and standardized rules point to a system designed for large-scale control, showing how housing has shifted from community living into corporate planning. Communities start feeling the pressure as longtime residents leave due to rising costs. New families arrive with short-term plans, creating a cycle where neighbors rarely stay long enough to build roots, slowly eroding the sense of stability that once defined local life. Some renters research how other countries handle corporate ownership, discovering that the United States has far fewer protections against large-scale buying. This realization adds another layer to the puzzle, showing why investors find these neighborhoods so attractive. As families share their experiences, they begin noticing how similar their struggles are. People in different states face the same rising costs, identical policies, and similar ownership structures, revealing that this housing shift is widespread rather than isolated. Parents start planning their lives around rent increases instead of personal goals. Decisions about school, work, and family depend on predicting the next jump in housing costs, showing how deeply these corporate systems shape daily life across entire regions. Renters realize that their payments have become part of investment strategies designed to last decades. This long-term structure means companies expect tenants to provide steady income, creating a sense that rent functions like an ongoing tax, tied to everyday living. People trying to budget for the future face uncertainty because rent moves faster than wages. The gap grows each year, pushing families to stretch their finances in ways that limit opportunities for growth or long-term planning. Communities begin discussing how the shift affects younger generations. Many young adults feel they will rent for most of their lives, not because they lack ambition, but because the system is built to favor large buyers and long-term corporate ownership. Residents who once believed the housing market would eventually settle down now understand that stability is unlikely. Investors view homes as permanent revenue sources, meaning the pressure to raise rent will continue as long as those financial expectations exist. Renters start recognizing how companies use data to maximize profits. Neighborhood trends, income levels, and migration patterns all feed into pricing systems that adjust rent in ways tenants rarely notice until the changes appear on renewal notices. People moving between cities see the same corporate footprints in multiple regions. The repetition reveals that these companies do not simply react to markets but shape them, turning entire housing landscapes into controlled environments built around long-term profit. Communities feel the change as local owners vanish. Small landlords who once offered manageable rent and personal relationships are replaced by companies following strict systems, leaving tenants with fewer choices and less flexibility. Some renters discover that the same investment firms control homes, apartment complexes, and even entire rental networks. This consolidation gives them enormous influence over pricing, competition, and availability, placing tenants inside a structure shaped by very few hands. Families trying to escape high rent by relocating often find the same companies already dominate the new area. The same fees, systems, and rent behaviors appear again, creating a sense that the housing market is being shaped by a nationwide blueprint. People researching ownership patterns find that many companies plan long-term expansions. They buy in waves, set pricing formulas, and adjust entire groups of homes simultaneously, turning neighborhoods into consistent income sources rather than community-focused spaces. Renters begin recognizing how unusual it is for a basic necessity like shelter to behave like a financial product. They see how their monthly payments feed investment funds, influencing decisions made by people who never experienced the neighborhoods firsthand. Communities dealing with these pressures often face increased financial stress. Families cut back on essentials to keep up with rising rent, limiting opportunities and placing more weight on every decision, from groceries to healthcare. People start connecting the dots between these rising costs and the disappearance of affordable starter homes. Without access to ownership, families remain in the rental system longer, strengthening the revenue streams that investment firms depend on. Neighborhoods begin to feel strategically shaped. Each decision seems designed to capture more revenue, reduce turnover, and maintain control, turning housing into a highly managed system rather than an open market shaped by everyday people. Renters who once believed rising costs were temporary now understand the structure behind them. These increases come from organized strategies built by powerful players who have the resources to shape entire housing markets to fit their long-term goals. People realize that their neighborhoods became part of a financial network long before they noticed. Homes were collected, organized, and priced based on investment needs, turning familiar streets into carefully managed assets without alerting the people living there. Many renters reach a point where they see the housing market clearly. It is no longer shaped by local trends or personal decisions, but by groups using data, scale, and influence to turn everyday living into reliable financial gain. Families begin questioning what their long-term future will look like in a system shaped this way. They wonder if ownership will ever be possible again, or if renting will remain a permanent reality built around predictable payments that never lead to stability. The full picture becomes clear. Housing shifted from a basic need into a financial tool. Neighborhoods were purchased, rents were synchronized, and living spaces became long-term payment engines. Rent feels like a forever tax because the system was created to function exactly that way.